Okay, let's look at Prep Test 29, Game 3. This is a simple ordering game and it's on page 17 of the simple ordering set. In this game they want to give awards to 7 different languages or research in 7 different languages, and they want us to put the order in which those awards are going to be given 1 through 7. Okay, so they want us to put the languages in order from 1 through 7. It's a one-to-one game because they say that the awards are going to be given one at a time. Okay, so let's just start on the rules. I've done some of the setup already, some of the not laws. Then we will together make certain deductions and finish off the setup. So the first rule just says that the German award is not presented first. That's easy enough to handle. It's a no-go under 1. So the next rule says that H is before K. Again, straightforward sequencing rule. It gives rise to no-goes, like all of these sequencing rules do. The H cannot go 7th because it has to be before the K, and the K cannot be first because it has to be after the H. The next rule is also a sequencing rule between L and J. It says L comes before J, so L cannot be last because it has to have the J after it, and J cannot be first because the L has to come before it. The final 2 rules are a little more interesting. Uh, the the next rule says the French award is presented either immediately before or immediately after the Hebrew award is presented. So this is a block, but the thing is it's an indeterminate block because we don't know whether the H is going to come before the F or whether the F is going to come before the H. So there are a few different ways to write this. The simplest way to write it, or at least the most straightforward way to write it, might be putting HF or FH. And that's really what the rule is saying, right? It's saying either H is going to be immediately before F or F is going to be immediately before H. That is a perfectly good way to write it. I think that's the way that I wrote it when I did the test. If you wanted to sort of write less and shrink it a little bit, you could write it like I've written it. This is the way I prefer to write it now. Uh, the reason that we write it this way is you have to, like I said, write less. So we say H is going to be before F and we put it in a block, but then we put this arc up here to indicate that it could be the other way around, that the F could also go before the H. But we just know that they're going to be next to each other in a block. The next rule is the exact same thing between K and L. So we know that K and L are going to be in a block, but we don't know which one's going to come first. So again, we put the arc up here to indicate that we don't know what the order between K and L is going to be. We just know that they're going to be in a block. All right? So these are the rules, and these are the straightforward no-go uh, deductions that we would make. But there's a bigger deduction that we need to make, and that would help us a lot if we can make it. You might be able to go through the game without it. You probably still get the answers, get the questions correct. But this, I think, deduction will make your life a lot easier. So let's see if we can, because we have a lot, the H appears in this rule and the H appears in this rule, right? The K appears here and here's the K again. The L's over here and here's the L. So we have a lot of overlap in terms of which variables are involved in the rules. And so we want to try to put those together, okay? It starts with a very simple thing that we have talked about in previous videos, which is that if you have a block like we have between H and F, even if you don't know the order between H and F, if you have a block and then one of the members of that block is also involved in a separate sequencing rule, like the H is here with a K, uh, like then you know that both members of the block have whatever sequencing property the one member is assigned in this situation. Okay, so that was a bit wordy. We can say it more simply. I can just say that, look, because the H and F are going to be next to each other, so if the H is before the K, then the F is going to have to be before the K also. So it's a very simple thing, but this is a good example of where they take it up just one notch, really, in terms of the way that they're applying it, and the utility of it, the usefulness of it goes up drastically. Okay, so we'll see how it's slightly more complicated because we still have a little bit more to do, but it's slightly more complicated, not very much so. So the H and F are going to come before the K. That we know for sure. Okay? But then we look at the K and we see that the K is in this block down here. So L is in a block with K. If H and F are going to come before the K, then they are also going to have to come before the L, right? There's no way that the H and F can come before the K and not come before the L. Just to be very, very clear about it, if the HF are coming before the K and I put the L after the K, then obviously the H and F are going to come before the L also. And if the H and F are coming before the K, but I put the L before the K on the front side, because the L has to be right next to the K, the H and F are still going to have to come before the L. Okay? I definitely am over explaining it here, but I just want to make sure that nobody is confused by what I'm saying. So one thing we can do now is take this H and F. We want to put it here under our deduction. Okay? So we know that this indeterminate block is going to come before this indeterminate block, right? And that was simple, I think, but it's going to be very important. And I know just from working with students that a lot of students miss it. So simple things, just making sure that you follow them through to their end and then use the implications in the game, even though they're simple, can really make your life a lot easier. So the final part that we need to add to this deduction is that the J is going to come after all of these. Okay, and we know that's true. I think it's pretty straightforward because the L has to come before the J. So uh, the L is over here and it has to come before the J. So let's put the J after the line that we had built so far. So now we know that the H and F, we don't know their order, but they're going to come before the K and L. And we don't know the order between the K and L, but we know that the K and L, regardless of their order, are also going to come before the J. Okay, so now that we came up with this big deduction over here, this big line, let's turn it into places where those variables cannot go on our setup, right? Let's turn it into no-goes. So we start on the right side with the J. You could start on any side, but let's just start with the J. So we already knew, or rather, when we'll look at our lineup, we see that the J has 4 people to the left. So that means that there are going to be 4 no-goes on the left side of the board. We need to leave at least 4 spaces before we put the J down, right? So we already have 1, so we just need to add in here that the J cannot be here, the J cannot be in 3, and it cannot be in 4. Let's move these up slightly. Okay? And there's nobody after the J, so that would seem to be it for the J. So let's go to the next set of variables, in this case, the K and the L. So with the K and the L, we have people on both sides, or we have languages on both sides. So we have the J after. Both the K and the L have to have at least the J after, which means that they have to have at least 1 no-go on the right side of the board, right? Because the J comes to the right of the K and the L, so we need to leave room for the J. So we already have the one for the L there, so we'll just put the K down, okay? Now on the left side of the KL block, we know we're going to have at least H and F, which means that we need to leave at least 2 spaces on the left of wherever we put the K and L in order for the H and F to go. Here we see that we already have 1 no-go for the K under 1, so we need to add in 1 for the L. And then under 2, we need to add in 1 for the K and 1 for the L. And hopefully this is old hat for you. We've done this before. The new, maybe if there was anything new in the way what we're doing right now, it was coming up with this deduction. But once we have this deduction, we should hopefully be able to do the no-goes relatively easily. But there is one thing you have to pay attention to with, and we can talk about it in terms of the K and the L. We don't know the order again between K and L, right? We've said that before. So one thing you need to be careful of is not to think, to forget that and think that the K is going to come before the L and put in an extra not law for L under 3 in this case. You don't want to do that, right? We don't know the order. That's why we put that arc here. So we can't assume that the K is going to be before the L or the L is going to be before the K. So we aren't going to get any no-goes from that, right? We just want to go with what we know for sure, which is that the H and the F are going to come before both the K and the L, and that the J is going to come after both of them. Okay, so now let's do the no-goes for H and F. H and F both have to have at least three people after them, which means three people to the right of them. So we want three people, we want three no-goes on the right side of the board for H and F. Okay, so we have one for H already here, but we need to put the F down. And then we need to do two more for each of them. So we can do that, and then we have to do this. Okay, so what we did, again, I know most of you are way ahead of me on this, but just to be clear, what we did was leave room for the three people, the K, the L, and the J, the three languages that have to come after the H and F. That's why we put these no-goes here. We're saying we're leaving room for the K, the L, and the J. Okay, so this deduction that we came up with, this big line, generated a lot of places where the variables involved in that line could not go. It took us some time to write down all of the no-goes that came from this deduction. Some of you may be thinking to yourself that, well, I probably, once I had this deduction, I didn't need to write all of those no-goes down. I didn't need to spend that time. I could just use this to do the game. And there is something to that. We only have two variables that are not on this line, G and S, and there aren't a lot of rules about G and S. There's actually only one rule, and it's about G, and it says that G can't go first. So if you wanted to use this line and just think about it in terms of, well, I can slip the G and the S anywhere into this line that they would go. So I could slip them, I could put the S in front, but I can't put the G in front, okay, of the H and F. But then any of the remaining spaces I could put either the G or S in. So I could put either the G or S or both in between these two blocks, in between the HF block and the KL block, or I could put them in between the KL block and the J, or I could put them after the J, or I could put one in between the KL block and the J and one after the J. If you think that you can work with this line, uh, not just think, but if you're pretty confident that you can, then that definitely is a way that you could do this game. But if you have any doubt, then my recommendation would be to go ahead and write down all the no-goes. It's probably not going to take you that much time. So a lot of times people really get worried about things taking them a long time, and they overestimate how long it's going to take them, one, and two, they underestimate the importance of having something written down and preventing yourself from getting confused. Okay, so that's pretty much the last thing I wanted to say about this game. The major thing you need to take away from this game is how you can put indeterminate blocks into a big line, even though you don't know the order within the block. Okay, and the other thing which is simpler is, or I'll leave it to you whether it's simpler or not, but it's related and it's not too complicated, and we've seen it before, is that if you have two members of a block, okay, in this case H and F, and then one of those members is involved in a sequencing rule, then that sequencing information applies to both members of the block. Okay, so in this case, H and F, we don't know their order, but we know they're in a block, so if H has to be before the K, then so does the F. That simple point is something that very well could show up on your exam and could make a difference in how you do, because if you miss it, you're going to end up botching that game. All right, let's go to the questions in the next video.